In Germany, they came for the communists, and I did not speak out, because I was not a communist. Then they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out, because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out, because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me.
We are 60 seconds from the live show. 60 seconds. That's gonna be on camera. It's gonna be on camera too. Okay.
I need an audio check on acre 3.
Seconds.
Split. You go to the camera and check it out. You need to pull back to a 2-shot.
I need that story in like right now. I need this right now. I need 30 seconds. I don't like the average of the shot. You have to go on the ticket.
So what exactly should I be expecting?
We are live in 30
I need a mic check right now. Lindsay,
recording.
a little louder.
Seconds.
Keep talking.
10, 9.
My name is Tyler Nielsen. I'm a high school student, and this is my first period class, a broadcasting and filmmaking program. Our show reaches an audience of 3,000 students and teachers, and it's live, every day. A group of students from this class decided 1 year ago to take on a project that would change our lives. Think about this for a second. What do you really know about the Holocaust? I mean, really know. Beyond the numbers, the dates, the facts and figures. What actually happened back then? This is the story of 16 American high school students who spend a year looking for the answers. This is our story.
Das ist eine Realität aus Blut und Fleisch!
During the making of this film, we were often asked why a group of 16 high school students would take on a project like this. The truth is, most of us are not Jewish. Our families were not directly affected. Why would we want to learn more about something that happened so long ago, to people so far away? I really didn't know very much about the Holocaust. We knew that 6 million Jews were murdered in Nazi Germany, Austria, Poland, and other countries of Eastern Europe. We knew about Hitler and the Nazis and the evil things they did to people because of who they were, their beliefs, or how they looked. But that's all we really knew. That was 1 year ago, and that is where our journey begins. This is not just my story. This is our story. Meet Jancy, Rory, Sean, Brent, Alon, Haley, Darren, Max, Krista, John, Dakota, Ryan, Alexandra, Jerry, and Sean. Together, we spent a year meeting and interviewing survivors of the Holocaust. We brought our cameras into their living rooms and asked them to tell their stories. Twice we traveled to Europe, where we were given special permission to film in 3 concentration camp memorial sites, in Germany and Poland. We will take you inside these camps. As strange as it sounds, one of the biggest challenges in making this film has been thinking of a title. Should we call it Never Forget? Never Again? Or possibly We Must Remember? None of these titles really describe what we felt or learned while making this movie. And if we didn't fully understand it 1 year ago, we understand it now. The Holocaust was a living hell. Word about our project began to reach the community. Local newspapers ran article after article, and we began to get letters from people living in our area that had lived through and survived the Holocaust. People who watched their parents and brothers and sisters taken away by the Nazis, never to be seen again. Many of their survivors told us that even now, many years later, they would have nightmares the night before our interview, and for many nights after, as they relived the horrors they had endured while in these camps. Just thinking about and talking about their experiences was almost too much to bear, and yet they felt they needed to share those memories with us, and we listened. Before we visited the concentration camps and saw them with our own eyes, we wanted to know what life was like there during the war. How did the prisoners get to the camps? What did they see when they arrived? What was day-to-day life like in a Nazi concentration camp?
We were treated just like slaves. Because the food was basically just enough to survive.
A lot of people died of hunger. A lot of people throw themselves at the electric wires to end their lives. A lot of people couldn't take it. I've seen many things, people being attacked by dogs because they simply were not straight in a line.
The living and working conditions in the concentration camps were so horrible that even now, for us, many years later, it is hard to find the words to describe them. Most of the survivors who shared stories with us were teenagers when they were taken to the camps. They could be considered the lucky ones. How can we possibly think that suffering in this way could ever be considered lucky? Because the younger children, many of whom were brothers and sisters of these prisoners, and adults who were sick, disabled, or thought to be too old, were taken immediately to the gas chambers. These were the people that were of no use to the Nazis.
When they put the people in the gas chamber, they didn't even give them enough gas. They would shove them out through a back door, and some of them are still alive, and they were burning them.
Or if you go out of line, you know, we walked in 5. When you go out of line, you get shot. And a lot of them walked out of line to just finish it, because they couldn't,
These images show women and young children standing in lines, waiting. Soon they would be escorted into rooms where they were told that they would be allowed to shower and clean up after their long journey. What they didn't know was that these showers were actually gas chambers. The Nazis became very efficient at murder. The gas chambers in some of the concentration camps could hold as many as 2,000 people at a time.
They were marching us into another room, and I looked up and there were showers on top. When you saw showers on top of the ceiling, in your mind it was, those are not showers, that's gas. I was breathing really fast, trying not to hold my breath because I wanted to breathe in the gas quick. My biggest fear was not to die, not to be burned before I die. I wanted to be sure that I'm dead before they throw me in the fire. And then all of a sudden, we feel ice cold water on us. And everybody started breathing easy.
In April, it was time for us to begin the second phase of our film. For months, we had been learning about the concentration camps by speaking with people who had survived the camps. Now we wanted to see the Dachau concentration camp for ourselves. After meeting so many survivors of the Holocaust and hearing their stories, we thought we were prepared for what we were about to see. Nothing could be further from the truth. The town of Dachau and the memorial there was the site of our first visit. Just 10 miles outside of the city of Munich, we traveled there by train. For months, we had been hearing stories of the horrors of these concentration camps, the gas chambers, and the crematoriums. Today, we would finally see one of these death camps for ourselves. The camp at Dachau was the first work camp built by the Nazis. Dachau was a training ground for Hitler's police force, the SS. Although Jews were among the very first inmates in this camp, it was also a place where homosexuals, Jehovah's Witnesses, groups who opposed the Nazis, and the chronically unemployed were sent to be intimidated and tortured.
When I went to Dachau, my first ever, concentration camp trip, I walked in and I tried to imagine what it'd be like seeing all these people that I seen the pictures and movies of all these people crammed together in this areas and stuff, and I couldn't, no matter how hard I tried. Looking at the concentration camp, I couldn't. It was hard. It was hard to think that such a thing could happen in such a place that it's kept clean. You look across the concentration camp and they got white stone. They got white walls, white buildings. You got trees. And you just look at it and it's literally almost a sea of white. And you look at the pictures, there was no white, there was no color. It was just dirt, mud, and sick, dying people.
Just walking in there, it was just, it was all emotionally impacting to me. And I thought it was very bleak, it was gray. I felt there was a presence there that hadn't left.
The sign on the main gate at Dachau means, "Work will make you free." This was a calculated lie, designed to keep prisoners calm and lead them to believe that if they worked hard enough, that one day they would be set free. The Nazis didn't just want these prisoners to die, they wanted to work them to death as slave laborers. This motto was later used on the entry gates of other concentration camps.
It's the day-to-day brutality that people can treat other people that way, and just how horrific they would beat, shoot, kill, starve, mistreat in every way imaginable all kinds of people for years.
The Americans arrived on April 29, 1945. When the first troops came upon this concentration camp, they weren't sure what they had found. James Stevens and Walter Maurer were young soldiers in 1945.
The horror that you saw, you just couldn't imagine people having to live in those conditions. Those that were alive were skin and bone. I don't know if you've ever seen anyone that was really skinny or not, but it just looked like skin stretched over bones, the ones that could walk.
The inmates were all walking around, those that could, in their striped outfits. To the right of where we were was one of the furnaces, and the bodies were in the furnace stacked about 6 feet or 7 feet high. This all helter-skelter, legs, arms, torsos, all which ways in that. And they hadn't, of course, been able to turn the furnace on, but I guess it would burn for days from the looks of it.
It's just absolutely unbelievable the way these people were treated. No human being should be treated like that. They weren't treated like humans at all.
Just knowing that people died here, and just to know that just really gives you a sense. I mean, it's hard to describe because you have to be here to understand it. It's just a deep emotion that just makes you sad and angry and frustration that nothing was prevented.
As I was walking through the barracks, there was this one picture. There was this guy who was over this bathtub or kind of sink area, and he had this collar on this chain, and it was just so gruesome what they had to go through. He was pretty much skin and bones, and just the fact that just the situations that they were put in, just unbelievable.
41,500 prisoners are believed to have died in Dachau or neighboring branch camps, most from disease, starvation, and exposure. When the American soldiers arrived in 1945, they found more than 30 railroad cars filled with decomposing bodies.
Conditions were very bad, and you could be shot on sight for the smallest infractions. You could be taken out for whipping punishment. On display in the museum is the kind of rack, they call it a sawhorse, a buck, that the prisoners were laid over and whipped.
For us, it was disturbing to see homes built right up against the walls of the Dachau concentration camp. Although these homes and the families living in them were not there during World War II, we still wondered whether the people living in the town of Dachau at the time knew of the horrors that were taking place inside these walls. Surely they noticed the constant stream of smoke rising from the crematorium furnaces day after day.
In the end, they could have known if they wanted to. I think many people just didn't want to know. For example, you might have seen the station of the town of Dachau. The prisoners were arriving there, and many of them had to walk on foot to the concentration camp, through the town, next to the houses. On the one hand, one must say they were too weak, or they didn't have the information, but on the other hand, they also didn't want to help the prisoners and to do anything against the camp here in Dachau.
Before leaving for Germany, we made special arrangements to visit 2 German high schools and to talk to German students there. We worked with the school's administration to get permission to interview these students for this film. We wondered what they are taught here in their own country about Hitler, the Nazis, and the Holocaust. Do they ever wonder, or know for sure, whether their grandparents were involved with the Nazis?
Many of the German high school students were very open with talking about the Holocaust.
When I first met the German teens, I expected them to be more apologetic and more sympathetic. Basically what they said is that we don't support what happened and we're ashamed of it, but we don't think we should be held responsible for something that occurred 2 generations before us.
It's like from the 9th grade, we just learn it every year in every different aspect, and well, we're kind of sick of it already, because really it's every year you get told about how cruel the Holocaust thing was.
I think the biggest difference between the German students and those of us working on the film is that I'm not sure how many German students have had the chance to actually meet the Holocaust survivors. We've sat face to face with them and heard their stories.
My grandparents, when I talked to them about that period, was that they were indeed quite enthusiastic about Hitler and the Nazis in the beginning. I can kind of understand that because he was young and he was, whoa, great, Germany is becoming bigger again. And
one student told us about a time when her family traveled to France on vacation, and their car was vandalized because the license plate revealed they were from the town of Dachau. Even now, it's hard for these students to travel anywhere in the world and not be taunted by what happened in Nazi Germany.
There's no flag, no German flag in any private house or car or anything. And this is because Germans are some kind of, ashamed still about everything that happened. And they are not allowed to have flags on their houses, because if you do, then everyone will say, oh, this is a Nazi family.
It's strange that we have to feel that we have to be ashamed of what people did 60 years ago.
Germany today is a much different country. We traveled throughout the region, sightseeing and meeting people. It is hard to believe that just 3 generations ago, this was a very different place. The students we met made a point of reminding us that the Nazis of World War II were defeated a long time ago. Could somebody like Hitler rise to power in the world we live in today? One night in downtown Munich, we came across this group of protesters who belonged to the National Democratic Party.
We were walking through this plaza called Marienplatz, and as we kept walking, we heard loudspeakers and shouting, and we kept seeing all these riot police.
I remember it was a Thursday night because earlier in the day we had visited the German high school students, and they told us about the NDP growing more popular in Eastern Germany, and the NDP is sort of like a modern-day Nazi group.
Unfortunately, all of our cameras had been left back at the hotel, so Sean took out his little digital camera and just started filming everything that was happening.
I was scared. I was really scared about what was happening. It was a very, very tense situation. You got people on both sides shouting. You got people, cursing at them. It was scary. I don't know how to describe it. It was very, very tense, and I was scared for the well-being of, some of the younger girls in our group.
And we will know how to stop that when they will get maybe the power.
In America, there is a group of people who deny that the Holocaust ever occurred. They have written us letters and posted comments on the internet criticizing this film. They have accused us of being brainwashed. They claim that Holocaust survivors make up stories, or that they exaggerate how bad it was.
I really don't see how anyone could ever say that it never happened, because there's no way that people can just say, let's put numbers on our arms and let's say that we were trapped in camps and we almost died and we were tortured in and we had to go through so much pain, nobody would make that up.
It shocked me that someone could just be so confused about history that they could believe that something this horrible didn't exist. I don't know how they can rationalize that so many people are making up their stories about being tortured in these camps.
I know millions of other Jewish people were killed and stuff like this. So what happened? So it didn't happen?
A few months ago, we met David Kopinski. He belongs to a group of Holocaust survivors called the New Life Club. David was 18 when he was taken from his home and sent to the first of 10 concentration camps. The year was 1941. He arrived there with his family, but would never see his parents or brother again. They were sent to be gassed inside a truck in the Chelmno concentration camp.
Nobody come back. They killed German kids.
David witnessed the very worst of the Holocaust. He was taken to the Auschwitz concentration camp by cattle car. He then walked for days in death marches from one camp to another. David was in the Dachau concentration camp on the day it was liberated in April 1945. He weighed just 74 pounds when he was finally freed. Other survivors we spoke to suffered similar conditions.
Starvation was so bad that cannibalism became stylish. I myself, among many others, became what they call a Muslim, hardly any muscles or flesh on the bones. I couldn't stand up and I couldn't walk. There were thousands like me. So we were picked up and just dumped in different piles by the crematorium.
So when we arrived in this big hall, the first person I asked, when will I see my mom? And she pointed at the chimney. Fire was coming out of the chimney and said, "You better talk about your mom in past tense, she's burning there."
In June, Rory, Alon, Jerry, and Dakota traveled to Washington, D.C., where they spent 3 days working in the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. The students traveled to the museum to search through hours of film footage and hundreds of photographs taken during the Holocaust.
I think the hardest thing watching was one of the scenes had children, people who were younger than me, people who could have been like my little brother or something, just laying their corpses out in a field, strewn about this field like it was nothing. And to see such a waste of life, such a waste of innocent life, it wasn't something that I was used to.
For 2 days, our documentary team was able to visit the permanent exhibit before the museum opened to the public. Visiting this exhibit can be an emotional experience. It occupies 36,000 square feet on 3 floors. What you can see here is powerful and moving.
The boxcar that you see behind me is an old boxcar that the survivors were piled up into. They were just all crammed into these boxcars and shipped off to concentration camps, death camps, extermination camps.
The photographs and films of atrocities help us to see what the survivors saw. Here we see proof that millions of people died during the Holocaust. The stories of the atrocities told to us by the survivors make these images seem even more real. As we have made a personal connection, these are not just names in a book or on a wall. These are the people we met, talked to, and watched cry as they told us their story.
We were told not to walk on the same side of the street if we saw anyone designated as a Jew because they had the Star of David on them. We were not allowed to walk on the same side.
Irmgard Allard grew up in Germany. Today she lives in the United States. Irmgard is not Jewish. She contacted us while we were making this film because she wanted to be sure that we told the whole story, that we understood that Hitler even treated his own people horribly, that many German citizens ultimately became victims of Hitler, the SS, and the Nazi regime.
People in the world still think that every German individual had something to do with the death of each one of those Jews, and we were too busy trying to survive. How do I stay alive? That was the principle for the civilian German people. I can't explain it any other way. Fear is a horrible thing.
For the last 9 months, we had all heard so much about Auschwitz and Birkenau. We knew that we had to go there. We had to see these camps for ourselves. So in August, 6 students working on this film boarded an airplane and returned to Europe. 16 hours later, we arrived in Krakow, Poland. Unlike other cities in Poland that were bombed heavily during World War II, Krakow was spared much of the damage. After finally getting the okay to take our cameras into the memorial site and being assigned a private media guide, we traveled 40 miles outside of Krakow to the camps at Auschwitz and Birkenau.
Auschwitz and Birkenau were nothing like I've ever seen before. I mean, when you think of a concentration camp, I mean, the picture of Auschwitz and Birkenau pop into your mind.
You just get that feeling of people dying and people getting hurt. And it's really sad to think about the kids that are my age that went through it. I always think if I was alive back then, what would have happened to me?
Within walking distance of Auschwitz is the death camp often referred to as Auschwitz II, or Birkenau. Of the 1.3 million prisoners who were sent to Auschwitz and Birkenau, more than 1 million were killed here.
Originally, the wooden barracks used to be prefabricated stables for German army horses. Such a stables was designed to hold 52 horses in, and the number of prisoners, instead of the 52 horses, was at least 400. 6, 8, or even 10 people slept in one bed, usually squeezed so much that if one prisoner needed to roll over, the others, one by one, had to do the same.
Birkenau was a vast concentration camp, more than 10 times the size of Auschwitz. It held over 300 barracks, filled over 425 acres, and it was designed to hold as many as 200,000 prisoners.
There was one time where I gave up, and I did cut my wrist. And my friends saved me by protecting me, by taking care of me the time. And the unfortunate part is, I'm the only one who survived.
They would bring a pot, maybe a 6 or 8 gallon pot, and we would take a sip of it. In the morning you have 1 sip or 2 sips, that was your breakfast coffee. At night the soup, we would take turns to take a sip of the soup. The soup was nothing but dirt and cabbage.
As our journey here comes to an end, we return to Munich one more time. Since our previous trip 4 months earlier, we had kept in contact with the German students we met in April. They have now become our friends, and we still have more questions for them. This time we asked them to visit Dachau with us. For 3 of the students, this was the first time that they have visited Dachau since elementary school.
Holocaust, it's something the Germans did, and so it's a weird feeling. So because you're German and you don't really have to do anything with it, and maybe your grandparents don't have anything to do with it either, but you're confronted with it wherever you are.
Well, I think it's of course a really, really sad part of the history and a really bad chapter, but what happened, you can't stop it and you just have to live with it. And I think it's just good that we keep those memorial sites to just show the world that we live with the history, but we try to stop everyone else to do that the same.
The students, our friends, remind us of the many years that have passed since the Holocaust, and that today Germany is a far different place from that which Hitler and the Nazis controlled. So is it possible for those who suffered so much here to forgive?
Forgive? What the millions tell me, what I was dying, children. I saw children to bring in crematorium. They have to forgive, not me. They have to be. They're dead, they're killed. Oh, but not me, I have not the right to forgive them.
If they gave me a gun and they told me, this guy killed your father and your mother, if they could prove it, I could shoot him. I really could. As much as I sit here, I really could.
For some, time heals. For others, the wounds and memories are too horrible to ever heal. As we say goodbye to our new friends, we realize that 1 year ago, we knew very little about the Holocaust. How does one comprehend that which is beyond comprehension? The attempt to exterminate an entire race of people from the face of the earth. First you ask why, and then you ask how. The more questions you ask, the harder it is to understand. 1 year ago we began this journey. We knew it would change our perspective. and now find it has changed our lives.
Some of the stuff is still going on today, obviously not in as large of a scale, but in some sense it is, and it scares me.
This is happening again in our world. Maybe not on such a mass scale, but this is happening again, and we need to let everybody know that this is terrible, and we have got to stop this.
It's always the quote people say that if those who do not know history are doomed to repeat it. And if you look at the world today and there's still genocide going on, if people just understood the pain that comes from it, if they looked in the Holocaust and listened to the stories of the survivors, I don't think there would be another genocide. I don't think they'd let this pain happen again.
Working on this film for the last year has given me the chance to visit concentration camps and listen to survivors' stories and discover the horrors of the Holocaust. It's changed who I am, it's changed my life.
I've discovered that it's not just about tolerance, it's about sticking up for others, and by protecting others, you protect yourself.
Working on this film has really opened my eyes. It's taken me out of my little beach town life, and it's made me view the world differently.
The Holocaust didn't just happen overnight. First, they started calling them names, they took away their businesses, they took away their dignity, they took away their lives. So now I'm much more aware of hateful words.
This film is our contribution to promoting understanding and conveying the lessons learned through the eyes of a new generation of American and German high school students. It's not just learning the history of the Holocaust that is important, but the lessons of the Holocaust. And that is why we must remember.
When I was told every day I'm never going to get out of here alive, I said to myself, when I get out of here, so I did not allow the Nazis to murder my spirit.
I see a man with a gun and hate across his eyes. I see a girl try to run and find no place to hide. But it seems to me that love's enough to stop this from repeating. 'Cause hate's a thing that blinds us to the bodies that we're beating. We must remember a life's not